a behind-the-scenes guy. I don't spend a lot of time in front of groups talking. This is the first time I've given this presentation. There'll probably be some mistakes in there, but in any case, a bit of history. Graduated with Georgia Tech as an electrical engineer. Spent 5 years at LXE in Norcross. It's about a 100-person company, pretty stable. I came in as a developer, just writing software. It was right when the ISM band opened up, which is now the 802.11 spectrum. Worked on their original protocol for doing frequency hopping in the ISM band. Got first patent at that location. Then I went to Panasonic for 5 years. LXE worked on in-building wireless data terminals. So there's the industrial terminals that you mount in a forklift truck that you drive around in a warehouse, and it tells you what boxes to pick up and take everywhere. And then Panasonic was the next stop, and that was in-building wireless voice. So we took a combination of products that Panasonic made, put them into a system, and it was for doing in-building voice. The combination of all those products was a kind of a new idea to find a new solution for stuff that Panasonic was already doing. It operated a lot like a startup. Pretty small group, we had a lot of freedom, and kind of got my appetite for what it might be like to do a startup. So during that time, there was a salesman who used to come in and try to sell us BIOS software. We got to be friends, and okay, getting the hang of this thing here. We got to talking about possibilities. He was wanting to start a company. I had this idea to start a company as well. So we eventually created, as co-founders, our first startup. I'll talk about that a little bit in a minute. That company lived for 4 years there, I guess, 3 years. And then I'll talk about it in a minute. It got purchased by Amazon. 99, moved out to Seattle, worked there for a year. And then I started another startup called Onboard Wireless, which is about location-based services for recreational boaters. It was really an experiment to get familiar with how the location-based service idea worked. And it was a couple of things that made it nice. The boaters all already had GPSs. They worked everywhere they went. They all had PCs. So there was a great platform to play around with services that might revolve around that industry. But of course, I don't know, maybe you don't remember, but during that time, it was a bad time for the technology industry, and all the boats had for sale signs on them. So no one was buying things for their boat anymore. So that didn't go well at all. During that time, I was a board of advisors for another company startup called Mobilis. In 01, I joined them as a full-time. I wasn't a founder. I was just sixth employee. The guy who ran it, Brian Levin, was a master at getting big brands on nothing but vapor, basically. And I was amazed because I'm a technology guy. My role is to try to make things real. So if he could bring the brands and I could make them real, I felt like we had a good combination there. So over the next 4 years there, we really grew that company up. I'll talk about that in a minute. Then I had a couple more. MediaGet was a company that tried to do a little home-based smartphone before there was a smartphone. Didn't go well. So I'm just trying to convey this idea that all through there's some successes, some failures. You learn a lot from both. It's not always a sure thing. And talk about some of those details. In all those, I've always only been one role. I'm the hacker guy, the technology guy. In my case, I've generally only had one other person in the company as a starter. So I can only give you the perspective from my perspective. And so how I think the other roles work may not be correct from their perspective, but it's how I see it. And so in the last Startup Academy, you guys heard from Jen, and she had this slide there, and I was trying to write a slide about what it was like for me just to be in the technical role in a company, and her slide really says it all. So there's really not much more I can say there. There's a lot of wisdom in that slide about what it's like. So when I started, it was in the late 90s at Convergence, and when this device came out, this is sort of the original BlackBerry device. You can see that a masterful screen there. Yeah, that screen has each icon on your iPhone, each app icon has like 100 times more resolution than that whole screen has. So it's monochrome, it beeps really cool, old school video type game beeps. I tried to boot it up, but it's resetting. I guess it can't find its network anymore, so it's lonely. But when that device came out, it was a pager that could talk back. So there was a back channel. It was a 9600 baud that everyone shared, if that gives you an idea for bandwidth. You could only send back canned responses, and you could send out in your page the things that the user could reply with. so the guy sending the data could decide what the answers could be. So we were joking about what the wife might send to the husband about, you know, what she wanted him to buy for her or whatever. He could only pick from these items, you know, that kind of thing. And we were trying to convert that into a way to browse the web, because these days there wasn't a way to do that. And so the original idea when I was at Panasonic and this other partner and I were talking, when this device came out, it felt like this is going to become big. It felt like the two-way, now pagers can talk back, there's a data terminal in your pocket that goes everywhere you go. So we decided to leave and start the company. Over the duration of that company, by the time we got acquired, the Palm 7 came out, which I don't know if you guys are familiar with the PDA devices. The Palm 7 was one of the first that was communicated in both directions as well. And you can see on the picture there, Amazon.com, we built a framework that allowed you to take a website and scrape it from the front end and convert it into this protocol that was used by the Palm network. And then you could basically browse the web through that, through this device. And so we went out to Amazon to show them how you could buy a book from these pagers, and they were just about to start a group to go and do that, so they ended up buying our company. So that was our first acquisition. We were 12 people at the time, and it seemed like an easy story, but in the meantime, well, there was a lot of pain. There was some years that went by there. You can imagine trying to scramble along and provide you know, food on the table. I had 3 kids at home. I didn't have anything in the bank, so I couldn't afford to miss any paychecks. And so we did all kind of different contracts. It was basically whatever we could get anyone to pay for. I did a numeric pager software from scratch, you know, for one company. We got paid to do a home terminal kitchen phone thing that was like a display with a calendar and contact list and browser and email. We did a Bluetooth. This is in the days when Bluetooth was just coming out, and there was a SIG, a special interest group forming, you know, that was IBM and Intel and 3Com and all these companies to create the standard. So we joined that. I used to go to Malmo, Sweden or whatever to the different SIG meetings, but we couldn't make it turn it into money because it wasn't real yet. So we came up with this thing called the Early Entrant Program, the BEAT program. And our founder and some of our investors had deep contacts selling BIOS software to PC makers in Taiwan, Compals and Inventex and Compacts. And so every month we would fly over to Taiwan and give them an update on the status of Bluetooth. So we would tell them what was going on in the SIGs and talk about what was coming out later. And so we were able to monetize the Bluetooth standard. But in the background, all this time, we were still working on this web to wireless transcoding engine. And so in the end, that's what we ended up selling the company on. So the vision was right all along. We just had to find a way to pay the bills in the meantime. The Amazon, the group that our company, when it was acquired, became the Amazon Anywhere Group, and our focus was on the using Amazon on things besides a PC. And that group then grew and became sort of the web services group, which is sort of kind of what Amazon is most known for now, I think, is the engine that it is rather than the product that they sell. And I feel good that even to this day, when you look on Wikipedia for Palm 7, the app they show there on that picture is the Amazon app that we took to show them our company. Secondly, then I went from there to another company called Mobilus. And again, the guy was just a brand master pulling in big names. Our first contract was the Winter Games trivia competition. And then from that, we did a Coke under the cap promotion where you open a Coke and you type in the code on your phone and it gives you a coupon or whatever, those kind of apps. And then we had a deal with Family Feud. Hundreds of thousands of people would play Family Feud as an SMS game back and forth. We had Jumble, the game on the paper where we would just send a scrambled word and they send it back unscrambled. People would play this game 8 hours a day, all day long. Unbelievable. And then that turned into the short code response systems where you vote on TV shows, so American Idol, for example. So the first one was the first cross one, Nashville Star was the first cross-carrier version of that. Back in these days, you had to reserve short codes by each carrier individually. So we actually had to go out and procure the voting codes for every carrier individually, make the system that connected to it. And that was one of the first voting shows that ever came on in the US. And then that turned into the American Idol. So we were processing the AT&T votes, the singular phone votes for American Idol for those first few seasons that it was in the US. It grew to about, I don't know, 5,000 or 6,000 messages a second during the voting times when I was there, and then it grew bigger than that after I left. So it went from, we wrote this system from ground up, amazing that we were able to get that deal as small as we were. That company grew to about 100 people and then was acquired by a company in Japan called Index Corporation that does mobile media type applications. We did games, J2ME type games, and so on. So what is a hacker role really? To me, as you think about the different roles within a company, in a nutshell, to me, this is sort of the top level. The main point is that you bring the credibility to the startup. In many cases, it's necessary for the business people to sell vapor. They have to sell it before it's real. And so in almost every case, every big deal that we did as the hacker, the technical guy, it came to a spot where the customer would come to me, shake my hand, look me in the eye, and say, "Can you deliver this?" Not the business guy, not the marketing guy, me, the technical guy. Okay, so the second thing is the technical culture. You decide what it's like to work in that company as an engineer. I think that's important to set. And then you're primarily about delivering the goods. So as you grow the company gets bigger. There's 3 dimensions that you have to focus on. The main thing is recruiting. Is all about, no matter what else the company's doing, it's about recruiting, getting good people. And it takes a lot of time. And I think in my own case, I wish I'd gone back and could tell myself, take the time. It's worth the time, because that's how you get unbound from this situation of being overloaded. Retention is important. When you grow, it's expensive for people to grow, and you train them up and then they leave. So it's important to have a way to keep people engaged. For me, I actually for our reviews, I would actually have people bring in their resume, and I would help them go through it and how we can tune it up, what things we could have them work on that would help them get better at their jobs. Because I feel like if we can make them better faster at this company, then they're not going to leave to go to some other company. And I feel like that's the main point that people are motivated by, that I found like me, engineers, is getting better. And if you can help them get better faster where you are, that's the better place to be. At the beginning of a startup, every person, every individual is a critical member. If any one person leaves, it can kill the company. But as you get bigger and bigger, you need to make it the case that no one person could take you out. Basically, no one person leaving could make the company unviable. So you have to be real careful to make sure you've got functional overlap. Okay. Processes. I used to hate status reports and timesheets and things like that. Originally, big companies like Panasonic, we had those, and I was really refreshed to go to a startup and not have to worry about that anymore. But as the company grows, you reach about 25 people, you get to 30 people, 40 people, it starts to be a burden, and you realize you do need to have some framework, some things in the company that processes are followed. And it's important to realize that. And I think of it like going from a single cell organism to a big vertebrate. You've got bones and joints and muscles, and people have different roles. Certain things can't bend, certain things should bend, and you have to build your company to understand that. And your main focus shifts from moving to thinking about how those groups relate to each other. So this comes up over and over in all the companies that I've worked for, and so I thought I would bring it up. You will always run into a situation where you need to decide if you're going to organize your company around the customers or around your technology areas. And I just mentioned that. There's a link. You can look it up online. But basically, to decide how you're going to organize vertically or horizontally is a big decision, and it's going to impact a lot of what you do. So I'd encourage you to go read this article and think about that as you grow in your company. Just a quick rundown of some thoughts. Again, this is a presentation I'm just putting together, so I kind of tried to collect all my thoughts in one place. It's mostly about creating credibility. It becomes more and more about managing people than managing technology. So even though you're a technical guy, once a company gets big enough, you're spending most of your time with people, trying to figure out why somebody's mad at somebody, or where somebody should sit, or whatever. And that's just a fact. If you don't know how to do that well, it's worth getting that training. So even if you're an engineer, if you want to be in a startup that grows and you want to be able to serve that startup well, you need to think about getting people management training as well as technical. The most important thing about engineering to me is about estimating time. A CTO has to sell vapor and convince people when it's going to be there. So you have to be good at estimating how long it actually takes to do stuff. And this is not easy to do. So I encourage you, even now, every project you ever do, homework assignment, every job you have, at the beginning, guess how long it's going to take you, how many hours it's going to take you, and then see how well you do, and then gauge your thing. 1 minute? Okay. The biggest thing is when the company gets big, things get crazy, and you're supposed to be the point of calm in the storm. So I think about this comic a lot. It actually comes back a lot. It can feel really bad in a startup. There's a lot of heat. And your decision to be calm is a choice you make. It's not something that, you have to decide that you're going to be that point of calm in the middle of the storm while everything's going crazy. And I think a good CTO is about being that. Version control, you guys know. Another thing is when you're updating your software, when you're building your architectures, you need to think about it as piecewise update, not grand empty page updates. Big updates almost never work. So try to build your architecture so you can update things one piece at a time and not cause a big stress on the organization. The 10x factor, is that something you guys have heard of? There was a study about in the 60s about they took people with an average experience of 7 years doing software development, and they studied their relative performance. And there was a 10-fold variance in the performance of people of the same number of years of experience doing software. In some cases, the coding time 20x, debugging time 25x. These are all people with the same number of years of experience. So it's a dramatic spread. You can imagine there's a 10x difference makes a big difference in whether you're successful or not. So how do you get that? How do you become a 10x developer, productive developer? So this is an example from the 80s, Lotus 1-2-3 versus Excel. One of them took 260 staff years to develop, and the other took 50 staff years. Same basic product, they competed head to head in the marketplace. So again, how do you become a 10x developer? First of all, you don't need to type 10 times faster. You don't need to go take typing courses. You don't need to work 10 times as many hours. That's not what it's about. You basically need to learn the tools that you're using very well, and you need to work at a higher level. So you use modular blocks to put things together, and you know what those blocks are and how they work together. So you're not writing individual lines of code, you're writing blocks of code and hooking them together. I think that's really the main summary. And then they also get better every day. So by reading books, by reading other people's code. The thing that you guys have, I think that's a really powerful tool that most people don't leverage, is open source. There's a lot of great examples. Read it, look at it, learn how people do things. It's the main thing. So today, I'm at Panasonic, right across the street. We run an innovation center. So I've gone from these little pagers that I passed around to doing systems like this, where you get to mix cell phones and infotainment systems in your car. And we are currently hiring. So if you need to, let me know.